Welcome back to a special on power sector and the 14th IPPAI summit in Goa. In part 1, we talked about democracy versus development. Does democracy impede development or accentuates development process? And we also discussed key issues in power sector, issues of transmission, grid failure and grid constraints, fuel supply issues and geopolitics and power plays. We speak to leading voices such as G. Parthasarthi, former High Commissioner of Pakistan to India, Meera Shankar, former Ambassador of India to USA, on how geopolitics and power are related. Let's continue our talk on power sector. Let's start with the regulatory issues. The regulatory uncertainty. Is there overregulation in the name of transparency and multiple regulatory jurisdiction and their challenges? We talked to Dr. Pramod Dio, former chairman, the Central Electricity Regulatory Commission. Power is a key issue at the IPPAI summit. With me is the former chairperson of the CERC, Mr. Pramod Dio. Sir, welcome to Doordarshan News. So let me start with one of the topic which was discussed here. Has the Electricity Act failed the common man?
Well, it has helped the common man to many ways, like your right as a consumer have been codified. So that if he wants electricity connection, how it is to be given, what are his rights, also the standard of performance, the quality of electricity that will be supplied, and if there is any deficiency in the standard of performance, then also there is a remedy provided.
So, just tell me what are the key challenges and obstacles when it comes to the power sector presently in the country. We are a power starved country. What is the problems? Why can't we a power surplus, or at least we can provide minimum basic electricity in a sense to every household in the country?
No, one thing is the electricity is a very capital intensive, and also it takes time for a project to come up, gestation. So when you are talking of the generation, today the share of private sector has gone up in the last 6 years from 11% to something like 32%. And in another 5 years, private sector will be having 50% share.
So, could I put it this way that governance is a big problem in the power sector rather than other problems?
Governance is a big problem. It is a big problem because your utilities are still owned by government. They function like as if they are part of government. So one needs to depoliticize them, and that is not easy.
So, as a former head of a regulator, what do you think will be the future of electricity in this country? Will every person, every village in this country will have electricity in next 10 years?
Well, we can have, but it cannot be only dependent on what we call as that based on the grid, that line should reach every village. We'll have to also move towards the decentralized supply. And as the decentralized supply is set up based on the local resources, how it can be integrated into the grid. Those are the issues which will have to be addressed. Then it is possible to do it. Otherwise, every 5 years, we will declare that everyone will have electricity.
Thank you so much, sir. So that was Pramod talking exclusively to Doordarshan News. And how about hydroelectricity? Hydropower has been a major source of power in the country. Remember, India has a number of rivers crisscrossing it. But how safe it is? The recent Uttarakhand tragedy reminds how dangerous it can be to build dams in mountains such as the Himalayas.
The power is very crucial for the development of the northeastern region. What are the key challenges that this sector is facing in that region?
The main challenges in northeastern region is the poor infrastructure, road communication, that environmental clearance, geographically problem and geological problems, and the problems of the local people as far as job is concerned, and the development for the local people. These are the major challenges in northeastern region. The biggest challenge is the job for the local people, on account of which all the developers are facing a lot of problems on account of giving job to the local people.
But also, the region is very rich when it comes to some of the projects. I mean, you have ample of resources for development of that, isn't it?
Yes, we have ample of resources in northeastern region, But as I told, that the challenges are suppose we are making some hydro projects of big capacity, then there is a big agitation from the local people from the downstream area. They have that kind of fear in their mind that the local people are not safe in case a big dam fails. But all the developers are taking care of all these things. The thing is only to convey to the people, to convince the people that dams never fails, and all the developers are taking a lot of care, and they are designing the dam in such a fashion that there is no question of any failure of the dam.
What is the basic objective of NIPCO? How does it function? What have you agenda?
Our basic function is to develop hydropower there, thermal power there.
But there is also positive news. There are expectations that power tariff in long run will come down as compared with coal if power is derived from hydro. Hydro needs no import duty as does coal. It is more easily available and easy to procure by the nation. There is no cost of foreign subsidy and is environmentally friendly. Could hydropower be the future? But the meet was just not about talk on power and democracy versus development. Young entrepreneurs were also there. Young entrepreneurs had come up with their innovations. Meet Karan Dhol, who developed an Android application, an Android app for
So
security.
my first question
If
is,
you are
tell
in
me about
trouble,
your
this
application.
app will help
Hi.
you out.
Basically, we've developed this application called iWatch, which is designed in the aftermath of 2611. And the basic purpose of this application is to keep individuals safe. So after the horrific Delhi gang rape incident, we made it absolutely free of cost for all individual citizens. And only for corporates, there is a minimum charge for it. The application basically is the only application in the world which lets you record audio post facto, which means an event has occurred, you press the button, audio from before you press the button is recorded. And this was done specifically keeping in mind the fact that most emergencies happen instantly, and after the emergencies happen, you take whatever action you want, and a lot of that important information, the critical information, gets left behind.
And meet Veda Dhol. Her organization helps one to express themselves using dance, drawing, painting, or even writing.
So I've started a foundation called Prana, and it involves the use of expressive art therapy, which is using psychotherapy with dance, drama, music, and art. This work impacts and affects all kinds of people: children, old people, women. A lot of people who've suffered from like post-traumatic stress disorder or any kind of disability, because this work helps people to connect to their inner self and actually understand the inner messages without a focus on verbal words that are spoken.
A book was also launched, In the Shadow of Freedom, authored by Mrs. Lakshmi Dhol. The book is a love story of two lovers, one from Hitler's Germany and one from Gandhi's India. A tale spread across continents. The launch of the book was presided by the governor of Goa.
Of the many things which happened at the IPPAI summit in Goa was the launch of this book, In the Shadow of Freedom. With me is the author of this book, Lakshmi Tendulkar Dhol. Ma'am, welcome to Doordarshan News. Ma'am, tell me about this book. What is this book all about?
This book is the memoir of my parents. It's a biography for my parents. And the period of time that I have talked about is from the 30s till independence. Of course, it goes on a little further than that, but that's just like a postscript. And what is so relevant about this book and why we're launching it in Goa is because my father was from Goa.
Okay, ma'am.
His grandparents come from a small place called Maye, which is famous for this lake resort called Maye Lake, near Bicholim. And all his life he was a Goan, and we live in Belgaum. He had a home in Belgaum, but we would constantly come to Goa all the time.
So, ma'am, how much research went into writing this book? I mean, I saw some snippets of the book. It has a huge history, some pics also, but how did you discover it?
Actually, I was very fortunate. Just before my father died, he had taken a piece of paper on which he wrote the chronology of his life, which year he was born, where he went, where he studied, which year he was in Berlin, which year he was... And that was a guide for me. And I was very fortunate to have most of the letters and correspondence between Gandhiji and.
I would like to say that, is it right to say that this book is romance intertwined with independence struggle? It is joining together of a continent and a country.
Certainly, it is intertwining of romance and history, and I think what was relevant in all these points is that there was a lot of weight and a lot of suffering that happened during this time of World War II and independence and partition, and we can't gloss over it.
Well, if young people like me read this book, what lessons they can gather from this book, apart from history?
Well, that the fabric of life may be tough, but it is incredibly rich.
Okay, ma'am. Ma'am, any nice snippets you can read for our viewers from this book?
I'll just read 2 paragraphs of the time when my father was being released from prison and my mother went to pick him up. Released from prison. This was in 1945. A fierce monsoon rain lashed the dark, brooding halls of Hindalga prison on the outskirts of Belgaum. The wind howled through the trees, and the leaves swayed and rustled loudly. The potholes around the prison compound were filling up as the red laterite soil sucked up the water. It was almost as if the fury of the monsoon rain was a response to the events that had led up to this day. Gandhi had lost his wife Kasturba on the 22nd of February 1944, and he did not keep good health himself. A few weeks later, he suffered a severe malarial attack. He was released from prison on the 6th of May because of his failing health. It was a June day in 1945. Large numbers of political prisoners who had been detained during the war were scheduled to be released on that day. Across the road from the massive prison gates under a cluster of trees, a small crowd of people awaited for the release of the loved ones. Among them, huddled against the fury of the rain, was Indumati, which is my mother, and her brother Bal. Indumati made a slight, wispy figure in the great deluge. Just a few days earlier, she had received word from Tendulkar that he would be among the prisoners released on that day. I could go on, but it takes later. I'm sorry.
Thank you so much, ma'am. So that was Lakshmi Dhol speaking exclusively to Doordarshan News about her latest book, In the Shadow of the Freedom.
अगर सीमेंट जंग रोधक न हो तो जानलेवा हो सकता है। श्री अल्ट्रा रेड ऑक्साइड, भारत का एकमात्र जंग रोधक सीमेंट।
क्या हुआ बेटा? उन्होंने मुझे
बच्चे और उनके माता-पिता बाल यौन उत्पीड़न के प्रति सजग हों तो अनिष्ट से बचा जा सकता है। बाल यौन अपराध से सुरक्षा अधिनियम 2012 के तहत अपराधी को सख्त सजा देने का प्रावधान है।
There was also IPPAI Power Award distribution ceremony. The award for the best solar power producer winner was Welspun Energy Limited. Award for the best wind power producer was the Tata Power Company. Award for the best thermal power producer was DSW Energy Limited. So much was talked: power, democracy, geopolitics of energy and security of crucial infrastructure, fuel supply issues, and how big it is a risk to India's power sector. Also, has the Electricity Act continued to deliver to the consumer? Smart grid vision and roadmap for India. Issues in transmission, issues in distribution and open access. And as the 4-day summit came to a conclusion, we talked to the man who did it all, Mr. Harry Dhol, DG of IPPAI.
So my first question is, this is the 14th Regulators meet. What special happened in this year's meet as compared to the rest of the meet, the 13th meet which happened earlier before?
I think this year's meet was extremely successful in terms of not only the content and the wide subjects that were discussed. It was also very successful from the point of view of bringing together a convergence of very diverse ideas, whether it was the area of transmission, distribution reforms, generation issues, financing issues, We also looked at issues in the renewable sector. We looked at transnational trade under the SARC banner. We looked at the water power nexus. We looked at energy storage solutions. So, I mean, we really looked across a lot of new areas. And for example, our session on has competitive bidding failed in the power sector, and how successful has it been, and what does the future entail? These were all very important subjects that were discussed, and it was extremely interesting to get comments on democracy. We said democracy and development, or democracy versus development. Different people had different thoughts, but the consensus was that yes, while we do want development, it cannot be at the cost of democracy. And I think that is the main takeaway that I would say from this conference.
Okay, Mr. Dhal, I mean, last 4 days we talked to regulators, policymakers, industry leaders, and one key challenge that power sector is facing today is the shortage of fuel or the rising price of the fuel. So, I mean, from consumers' point of view, they want less tariff, but how do we strike a balance between this? Because, you know, there's a shortage of fuel, but we still need to, you know, from consumer point of view, we need to have, you know, subsidize the price.
You see, I don't look upon this as a major challenge. I'm looking upon this as a very good thing, because this will unleash the market forces of competition in the long run. So, like for example, in the developed world, if you find gas more expensive, you can switch to another alternate fuel. In your cooking, for example, in England, you can have gas-fired ovens as well as electric-fired ovens. So whichever is cheaper for the householder, he chooses that. This will encourage more and more investments in giving you multiple choices as you go down the road. Having said that, the interim period will be painful. You see, on the one hand, we are not asking our large section of consumers to pay for electricity. For example, our agricultural sector is completely power-free. I mean, they don't pay much for tariff. On the other hand, we want the Jhuggi Jhopri clusters also to be given power. So we are a very fair society, we are a very fair democracy. But at the same time, somebody has to foot that bill. Unfortunately, what is happening is that right now that bill is being footed by the commercial and industry of the country, which is making them non-competitive. So slowly and slowly, you will find that a balance will need to be struck where more and more people who are perhaps getting subsidized power or getting free power may have to start being brought into the net, so to speak, so they contribute at least marginally towards the electricity bill. The last session discussed about agriculture consuming approximately 40 to 60% of the energy of the country, and of that 50% was going into the sugarcane, the sugar industry. Now perhaps we need to bring in some new mechanisms to make sure that the farmer's productivity is not affected, but he brings in energy efficiency and water efficiency. So you need to, this is actually going to throw out more and more challenges, and that is going to bring in more innovation. So we have to look at it optimistically, and you also have to accept the fact that if you want imported fuel, you have to decide whether you want to pay the fuel cost or not. If you don't want to pay, then don't have imported fuel, and therefore you won't have that much power capacity. One very critical point discussed was that on the one hand, we have got a large quantum of power availability on the one side and power cuts on the other. But this is ironic, isn't it? That you have surplus power, you have stranded capacity of almost 40-50,000 megawatts. At the same time, you have power cuts. So what is this? The fact is that the electricity boards have become bankrupt. So now we are trying to fund them. But that also is within a limitation because of the FRP mechanism, because the conditionalities of raising funds, etc. This also is a temporary phase which will pass.
So the producers were there, the distributors were there, policymakers, other people. But what was the key two important points, I would like to say, for the common man?
The key point for the common man was that industry is becoming more and more aware of the need to supply 24/7 electricity to the consumers of this country at an affordable price.
We all know that now energy security is much needed, but what about the security of energy power establishments? This was one of the topics that you discussed in your meet, and how it is going to change the geopolitics of the region.
I think energy security and security of energy infrastructure is already, people are conscious of it, and I think steps are being taken to further improve the situation. And there was a lot of discussion on that, and I think the powers that be and the policymakers are quite aware of it. We got the support from the Ministry of Power, the Ministry of Non-Conventional Energy Sources, And we also got a lot of support from others, groups who are basically important people, thought leaders, experts. Particularly, for example, the thoughts expressed by Mr. Sam Pitroda, the advisor to the Prime Minister, who joined us all the way from the US. I think these are all very, very interesting, this thing where the message is going across, that to spread the awareness and at the same time to further improve. So we are very optimistic at the end of this summit that this has been extremely useful, and we are very humbled by the response we've had and the support that we've got from all quarters, and we feel very proud, though humble but proud, that we have been able to contribute in the national cause of bringing awareness and bringing better understanding, and not only just within India, but also we have had people from Pakistan and people from Bangladesh who are bringing in the SARC and the other perspectives. So we're very happy with that.
So my last question is, the policymakers meet always happens in Goa. It's on a lighter note. Why Goa?
I don't know. I think we always wanted to build Goa up to become the mini Davos, if you like. So in times to come, I think Goa is going to become like a Davos, where experts from Asia, perhaps across the world, will come here. And Goa is a beautiful place, great people, and a lovely place to be in.
Okay. So thanks so much talking to Doordarshan News. Pleasure always having you. Okay, sir. So that was our half an hour on what happened at this year's IPPAI summit here in Goa, where policymakers, regulators, bureaucrats and everyone who mattered in power sector met under one roof and discussed the various issues, problems, challenges in the sector and how they can be sorted out. But it was in Goa, and of course Goa and fun cannot be separable. So tell me, Rohan, so what was the whole atmosphere like at the summit?
See, amidst of all the hectic negotiations, all the deliberations and activities here, people also, I mean, all the policy makers, leaders, they all got chance to have fun also, to visit Goa, because being in Goa is a different thing. You know, I mean, all these policymakers who came here, they have, you know, they are always busy with work, but being in Goa, it was a retreat time for them, and hopefully the next year's IPPAI summit will also happen in Goa, and we in Doordarshan will bring you the main features of that summit also.
So thanks for watching. Bye-bye and namaskar.
Namaskar.